welcome to tonight, where we're going to talk a little about the temporary employment relief scheme in this difficult time. So if we just have a look at what we're going to have a look at is we are just going to have a look at the differences between the TERS fund and then of course the one that everybody is aware of, the COVID-19 UIF fund. There is a little bit of a difference between the two. We're going to have a look at the background of the TERS fund. We are going to have a look at what is a training layoff, the main aspects of a training layoff, how does a training layoff gets delivered, what is the Central Adjudication Committee, the applications and requirements for the TERS fund, the documentation required, training, and then we will have a Q&A. You are welcome to pop in questions in the chat box as you continue. There is some of the marketers and the guys organizing, the organizers of the event will collect the questions and we will have a nice Q&A at the end. So if we can just have a look at the first thing, if we have a look at the background of TERS. So we all are aware of the COVID-19 of the UIF fund, where you do an application for the UIF for the temporary relief and the UIF pays you out on based on the UIF, and you get a temporary relief on salaries for your employees. So that is the COVID-19 UIF one that we all know about, that works with a online UIF filing. The one that we want to talk to you about tonight is the TERS fund, the Training Layoff Scheme, or the Temporary Employment Relief Scheme. This is also known and was previously known as the Training Layoff Scheme. And it is a collaboration through NETLAC, the CCMA, the Department of Employment and Labour, and of course the CETAs, because it's got a big training part side to it. Now, if we look at the background of, so we're only going to concentrate on the layoff scheme tonight. So if we have a look at the background of the TERS fund, government has realized, and this actually came out just before the epidemic in December, all of these things came out and a little bit of the legislation was changed regarding the TERS fund. So government realized that worldwide, not just in South Africa, we are sitting in an economic crisis that we have not experienced in over 80 years, and something needs to get done. So a collective response was created between Labour and government to have a look at the poor and most vulnerable people in society that is currently in the labour market and whose jobs will get threatened by this economic downturn that we are going through. And I said, but we need to get something to protect them a little bit. And as well as economy can go down just so far, then there must be an upturn. And when there is an economic upturn, we normally also see changes in skills and skills required, what the labour market needs, etc., and all of those things. With this economic upturn, all the partners in this wants to have a look at that all the benefits for the economic upturn is fairly shared amongst employers and employees, that there is enough work and enough skills for everybody. So what has happened is NETLAC came with a framework document, and I said, okay, right, so we have this crisis and we need to protect these people and we need to make ready for this upturn. So we are going to have a look at something called training layoff. If we're going to do a training layoff, this needs to get financed. So let's go have a look at the National Skills Fund and the CETA. Let's get them to finance this whole this training layoff. This will be applicable to workers that would ordinarily be on your retrenchment list due to operational requirements, due to changes in the company or financial difficulties, due to the economic downturn, etc. The terms for employment, so the guys must be part of the company for a while, and that the terms of employment will be adjusted a little bit, but the basic conditions of employment will still apply. And we need to have a look at this as well, as that we will be reskilling people as an investment into the future of the company and the country and the economy. So that's just a little bit of the background from where the fund came from. So if we go and have a look at what is a training layoff. So exactly like the current TERS fund is, I have a temporary suspension, but now I will have a temporary suspension for training purposes. This suspension obviously is dependent on an agreement from the employee. So the employees must buy into this. It is the same thing when you go through a retrenchment process. You have to have consultation and talk to your employees, and they need to be aware of what is happening. So the same thing will happen here is you will sit down with the employees, you will talk to them and say, listen, instead of us going through retrenchment, let's go through a temporary suspension for training purposes. You guys would have to go on training, and let's get to an agreement based on that. What is also important is that the participation of the employees in the training layoff scheme needs to be voluntary from their side as well. You cannot force any employee to go onto this this scheme. They have to volunteer for it. The aims of this whole training layoff, of course, number one is for the employee to retain employment, and also for the employer to keep his or her employees for a little bit longer, but also having a little bit of financial relief. Retrenchments, to avoid retrenchments, is a big one. Enhance skills. So I will now be training and upskilling my staff in new skills and future skills that they require for the economic upturn, or where I'm moving my business into, or where the country is going with other businesses. The aim is also to support companies to survive this recession, and I think we can all agree that we are going into a very, very bad recession at the current moment. And of course, then, if there's a downturn, there must be an upturn. So to try and position the country, the employers, the employees, businesses for an economic upturn for the future. If we now have a look at the main aspects of the scheme, we have a look at the temporary. So it consists out of a temporary suspension of the employment, but you still retain an employment contract. The training linked to this fund can be flexible, but it must be linked to the company's skills needs. So when we look out of a pure skills development point of view at a company, when we start looking at skills development, we have a look firstly, what is the objectives and the core function of a company, and where are they moving towards, and we align the skills to that. So this very much works like that. So we try and align the skills to the needs of the company, not just the current needs, but the future needs of where everything is going, because certain positions will become redundant. That is just how the world works. If we go and have a look, in the 70s, we still have typists on typewriters. Now these days, if you can find anybody that can type your letter on a typewriter, or even just find a typewriter, it is extraordinary. So those are the type of things that we're looking at, or it's the core of this scheme. There's a training allowance linked to it, because there's funding from the CETAs and from the National Skills Fund. There is a training allowance linked to this scheme. Your basic cost package for when we talk about that regarding the scheme is that they are still wanting employers to still contribute to the UIF of the employees, and the pension, if there's a pension fund linked to their salaries, and there was contribution from the employer. The government is looking for that commitment from the employer. We will have a look at all the different scenarios in just a bit. So obviously, how does it work? The participation in the scheme, like I said, is as per agreement from the employees, and then it is subject to an approval of a committee that is sitting at the Department of Employment and Labour. The workers will remain employment during the training layoff period, but forgo their normal wages for a training allowance. So they will not have a normal salary anymore. There will be training allowances. Employers will still need to pay full contributions to the UIF, and the training layoff may be combined with a short-time work arrangement. So we all know that all over the world they are talking about shorter work weeks to help assist people keeping employment and getting everybody to work and companies to retain their employees and work and not have such a bad effect on the employees. So with this, you can also go and have a look at that and say, okay, cool, I can only have you or 2 days a week in my company. The other 3 days I'm putting you on training suspension. So you need to go on to training, and I'm not paying you for 3 days. So it can go hand in hand with a short time work arrangement inside of your working environment. When we have a look at the delivery of this, here we go. If we have a look at the delivery of this fund, we have a look at all the different role players. So there's quite a few role players involved in this fund. Firstly, it is the CCMA. So the CCMA is a very key part in this whole funding. They are actually the single point of entry when you apply for the funding. All the applications and everything will go through the CCMA. The CCMA also do recommendations. So they have a look at what is happening. They have a look at all the documentation that was submitted. They do a recommendation and they facilitate the conclusion of the training layoff agreement, because an agreement needs to get signed between all the different parties. We also have the CETA that is part of this. So the CETA is in charge of facilitating of the provision of the training, the funds for the training cost, the applying for training allowance, transferring of funds to employers, employees, and the training provider, monitoring the training, etc. So that's part of what the CETAs are doing. The Department of Employment and Labour, they have a committee. So this committee considers the CCMA recommendations. So when this application goes to the CCMA, they have a look at the recommendation. The CCMA put recommendations together and they send it to the Department of Employment and Labour, to the committee. The committee will consider all the recommendations, and of course then they will release the funds to the CETA. The employer is also part of one of the role players. So they make sure that the training allowance goes to the employee, UIF gets paid, etc. Now, what is very nice about this fund is that when we look at the training or the term for this fund, it is fairly flexible and it can be anything from 3 to 6 months. So you can have 3 to 6 months relief in your company depending on where you're going, how much training is involved in it, etc. You have a training provider, and in this case, because CTU is facilitating this with us, so CTU will be the training provider. They will provide the skills plan in line with the company needs, which is very important because you need that for your application to the CCMA, and they have all the training available. They will be in charge of delivering the training and to liaise with the CETA to ensure that everything runs smoothly according to the project plan. Ironwall, which will be the consultation partner, will consult on any TERS funding and assist any company with any application to the CCMA. I just want to put in here that the consultation on the TERS funding, the assistance with applications to the CCMA, we are offering it free of charge to everybody, to all employers at the current moment. So there's absolutely no cost in just sending an email to CTU and asking them, listen, what do we do? How do we get more information? Or we need assistance with the application. If we have a look at the roles, so we've looked at all the stakeholders, so there are specific roles as well. So if we look at the role of the Department of Employment and Labour, the Department of Employment and Labour will consider the application. They will look at the funding cost. They will get the funds released from the National Skills Fund and over to UIF and to the CTAs. They will also have an oversight and coordination on the delivery of the training layoff scheme. The CTA will structure the grant allocation and to accommodate the training layoff claims regarding the training cost and any other costs around that. They will facilitate the provision of training for workers. That includes engaging with individual companies regarding the type, the cost, the provider, or the duration of the training. So as you can see, this is a fairly flexible scheme, and there's lots of flexibility and options in this whole scheme that has been put together by government. The CETA also applies to the DOL committee for funding of additional training on the training allowances, and they ensure that funds get transferred from the employer to the employer and the training provider so that everybody gets paid. They also monitor and report on the training layoff scheme. So when this application goes to the Department of Employment and Labour, it goes to what we talk about a okay, there we go. Sorry, this clicking on the slide is a bit slow. So it goes to Central Adjudication Committee. They consider the application, and this application has 3 different scenarios. And the different scenarios that you guys are looking at is the Department of Education and Department of Employment and Labour can say, okay, cool, this is only for UIF only, so it will only be a wage subsidy. It will not be included with the training. Second one is that the second scenario is that they will look at a wage subsidy and a training intervention. So there would be UIF payment out for the salary of the employee. And then, of course, there will be training allowances and training paid as well for any upskilling of the employees. The other scenario is where an employee went to the CCMA and lodged a complaint or lodged an appeal and say, listen, but we're going through retrenchment, can't you help? The CCMA might say, but guys, listen, why don't you rather do a training layoff scheme instead of doing just a normal retrenchment? So that is when the CCMA comes and do an intervention into the company. If we have a look at the process, because we all want to know how this works, because we know the difficulties we've been having with this, the UIF claim. So that is basically the process. So you complete a request to the CCMA. So a request goes to the CCMA. The CCMA have a look at that request that you have sent in, and they look at they evaluate it. They evaluate it based on the potential of turnaround after the layoff period and whether the workers are eligible to participate in the scheme. So they have a look at all of those things. Then they do recommendations. And those recommendations, of course, goes to the Department of Employment and Labour. A training layoff agreement is put together and it is perused for compliance by all parties involved. It is then forwarded with all the advisory report and other documentations to a DOL committee and, of course, the effective CETA. The Department of Employment and Labour do the considerations based on the CCMA recommendations. They release the funds, and then, of course, monitoring and reporting comes in. So there at the bottom, we've just put in a little time line so that you can just see a little bit where we assist you. So with a request to the CCMA, Iron will will in a consultative manner assist companies to submit their request to the CCMA and get that process going. And then when the approval comes through, CTU will look at the delivery of the training of this this fund. So I was just so somebody asked me, what is the turnaround on this? Because we do the submission of applications to government, and we know sometimes we wait forever. I mean, those of you that work with the CETAs, we know sometimes we wait 8 months before we get any answer on any discretionary grant. So before the COVID-19 pandemic entered and everything started going havoc, the turnaround time from request to the CCMA until the payment, the first tranche payment and approval, was 15 working days, which it was less than a month. We are currently not sure how long that process is, because everybody is looking more towards the COVID-19 UIF fund than actually the training layoff scheme. So I do not want to lie to you guys, but before this epidemic, that is about the turnaround time that we were looking at. If we have a look now at applications and requirements, okay, so how does it work? Who may use this training layoff scheme? So any employer in South Africa, any employees, trade unions, any of those can apply for the layoff scheme. There is a threshold on your annual earnings for individuals that qualify for the training allowance, and that is 180,000 Rand per annum. However, that being said, it is a flexible amount. So if you have to put somebody on a training layoff scheme that earns a little bit more than that threshold, and there is enough evidence and proof and motivation for that person to go on a training layoff scheme, that is totally possible. What we need to understand with this is that the training cap that the CETAs and the Department of Employment and Labour has installed is not flexible. There is a maximum for training that can be claimed. So it's exactly like the current UIF, COVID-19 UIF TERS fund. We also have a look at reducing the risk of retrenchment. So who qualifies is any employee that is at risk for retrenchment in the company. Your limitations on it, of course, we all know it is we're working with a government institution, so the limitations to all of this is your company, you need to prove that your company is economic distress. So for any new company, unfortunately, that started right now around when the epidemic started, it is a little bit more complicated. And you have to prove that you've been contemplating retrenchment because you don't have any other option. So due to operational requirements and economical downturn, you have to retrench the employees even though you don't want to. The conditions of the training layoff scheme is that the benefit is therefore a short-term relief. So employers should not see this as a long-term solution, but as a short-term solution to give them time to breathe and restructure their company and see if they can get the company up and running again and making them ready for the economic upturn. One of the other conditions that is very important is that those employees that is going on the training layoff scheme needs to be reabsorbed into the working environment somewhere, either in your own company, or they must be upskilled in skills so that they can get reabsorbed into other workplaces. The statutory obligations for this is, of course, you need to keep on paying the UIF. Just something more on the training allowance. So the training allowance calculation works on a maximum income of around 12 Rand per month.
But it's the option, I don't matter. Oh, the audio is bad. It's about this whole thing that TERS that I've been submitting and submitting. So you want to do into that now?
Guys, are we okay? Cool. Good? Okay, cool. Okay, so let's just quickly go back. So the training allowance is based on the maximum income of individual. The cap is 6,239 Rand per month. So if you, would be per month for 3 months or 6 months. The other conditions that they are looking at is that your layoff should be continue for a period of at least 4 weeks, or there must be a partial layoff of 2 days per week or 16 days per month, and there should be a kind of contemplation for around 8 weeks regarding the temporary layoff of staff members. The employer still needs to have a look at social benefits contribution. So the employer must still pay for the UIF, for pension fund, for death cover, whatever statutory obligations the company have. Optional benefits is, of course, medical aid, housing, if that car allowance, etc. That is not compulsory for you as an employer to keep on contributing to those things. That is totally optional. But on the UIF and the pension and provident fund, if you are you have to contribute to that. You can't get away from that. You still need to continue during the training layoff. You have to contribute to that. Now, the big thing is, what documentation do we need if we do this application, right? So there is all the documentation that you require to have. So firstly, you need a request to participate. Then you need your annual financial statements. So you need audited statements from the prior year. If your financials have been audited, or you're on a new financial year and it's not been audited, and you've like 3 or 4 months in, they also want to see your unaudited set, the current unaudited set, or if you're almost at your audit. They want to see a balance sheet and an income statement. You have to have an agreement to participate. So there must be agreement signed between the employer and the employee to have a look so that they agree to participate in the training layoff. There's a terms and conditions document that needs to be signed. And then, of course, the list of the employees that will be participating in this layoff scheme. If we have a look at the training options, so what training can we do? So all good and well, now we get a fund so we can send people on training. What can we do? Number one, we will always be looking at how do we link this to the skills need of the company, of the country, of the economy, of the future skills required. We have various options when we have a look at what type of training we're going to advise you on. It's all depending on the nature of your company, the position of the workers, the future economic opportunities of that company, or other opportunities emerging like we've been seeing now with the COVID-19 in the medical field. The skills intervention, so what training can we do? So we can do absolutely anything. We can do a skills program that is accredited. We can do workplace skills that is either ABET. We can do personal development training, any of those things. And you can even consider looking at apprenticeships, learnerships, bursaries for your employees, etc. So you can have a look at all of those options. So what is very nice about this is that you are not restricted to only look at one specific training course that has to be accredited and has to be CETA approved. There is a very wide range of skills interventions that you can have a look at. Of course, we have to look at what is the benefits of this fund. So if we have a look on the employer side, we have a temporary financial relief. If you are like me, to me it's terrible with all of these things going on to send a letter to an employee and tell them, listen, sorry, we have to retrench you. What is their opportunities for the future? Nobody wants to do that. So it gives you a little bit of a financial relief. It gives you a little bit of a breather for 3 to 6 months. It also assists you with upskilling of your staff, helps you to prevent retrenchments, and also prepare you for the economic upturn that will happen eventually. On the employee side is, remember, now I'm learning new skills, so my skill set gets enhanced. I can apply for better positions inside of the company or with another company. And of course, by doing all of these, I prevent retrenchment and unemployment at the end of the day, because we do not want our unemployment rates to go up. Then just something else on all of these things. So the temporary layoff scheme is a very nice fund and all of those things, but we have to remember as well that the legislative impact on businesses and skills development currently with the COVID-19 has played a huge role. And if we have a look at that, so we know that the WSPs and ATR has been extended. So even if you go for the training layoff scheme, that is still a requirement for you to submit your WSP and ATR and have a look and to ensure that it gets submitted to your CETA to also give you access to future grants. So for discretionary grants, one of the big things for your your requirements is have you submitted your WSP and ATR. That discretionary grant, remember, is also an additional fund on top of your training layoff scheme that you can use to fund training for your employees, and that goes part of your BEE spend, because we all know we still need to comply to BEE. There has been no relaxation on any BEE requirements. We do know that there's a skills development levy relief for companies for the next 4 months, but that still does not affect your spend on skills that you're still required to do. Your employment equity obligations are still there. The email was sent out last night from the Department of Employment and Labour regarding employment equity reporting and employment equity planning that need to be adapted by all companies in consultation with their employees to have a look at the impact of the COVID-19 and what is happening and the changes to your employment equity plan, because it is going to play a massive role on your employment equity. And then, of course, we have a look. There is a lot of bursaries these days also available that you can that helps you with your spend at the end of the day, where you don't have to pay for full learnership. You can instead go and opt for parts of bursaries. And then, of course, one of the things that I'm quite happy about is that we all are aware of the youth subsidy, that when somebody in their first 2 years, they get employed, you get 500 Rand to 1,000 Rand back on their salary for the first 2 years. They have done that now. You can claim that on any employee in your company. So you get a little bit of a tax relief based on all of those things. Okay, so I need to keep with the time, and I don't want to keep you guys too long from your families. So that is just a little bit of information on the TERS fund. You will see on your screen now, there is just some questions for you to answer. It's just like, did you enjoy it? Was it informative? Would you like us to contact you to send you more information, or would you want to book a consultation? And I think then, can I go to the next slide? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, please. Okay. And then I will hand it back over to the presenter, the organizer.
Okay, so thank you so much for that, Renelle. We have posted in our chat box, if the previous slide went past too quickly, just a URL that you can please select to give us feedback on the session. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in our chat box. I am going to start going through the questions that we have received throughout the session. From the top, we had a question from Corneille who asked, will the TERS payout be monthly automatically, or should you reapply for May, June and July?
That is a very good question. So when you do an application for the TERS fund, you stipulate the time frame. So you say, cool, I'm going to do it for the next 3 months. I'm going to do it for the next 6 months. And in that is a plan on how the training will commences. And when that gets approved, it automatically gets paid out for that period. You don't have to reapply every single time for that funds.
We have another question. Does a company need to retain an employee, or do they stay on the payroll for the duration of the training layoff?
Okay, so it is very much, they will stay on your it's very much like what is happening at the current moment. So there will be a temporary suspension, so you do not have to pay their full salary or wages, and you will get UIF in, and they will be able to claim from UIF. So either the UIF will pay over to the employer or to the employee, but the employer must still contribute to that person's UIF. So that is very, very important. So they are still being seen as part of the employment profile, but they will not be receiving their full salaries or benefits from the company.
Okay, we have Leanne who is asking, can you please provide us with the relevant gazette?
Yes, I can do that. I'm sure if you just email CTU, they will just share the gazette with you.
Perfect. We have Hilton who is asking, is there a threshold amount, the gross salary, or is the threshold amount the gross salary or the cost to the company? So let's just quickly mute our guest. So I'm just going to read the question again. Apologies for that. Is the threshold amount the gross salary or the cost to the company?
It would be the salary.
Okay. There was a question about what is the threshold of the training cost?
So the threshold on the training cost is around 6,200 and something to be exact, per month per employee.
Okay, we have another question. Any company that was contributed to the UIF before the 15th of March is allowed to apply for the TERS scheme only. Is this accurate?
Yes, you have to have obligation, so you have to have been registered. There is a case that has happened that the company, there was, because of you have to have a look. This is looked at the CCMA and the Department of Employment and Labour very much on a case-to-case basis. So if a company has really been struggling and they were registered and they're a little bit behind on their UIF payment and certain things, there are certain things that they will do to assist you to be able to qualify for the scheme. But you cannot have a brand new company, because you have to submit income balance sheets and income statements for the last 3 months. So it must be a company that has already been, in operations for quite a bit, if that answers the question.
Okay, we have a question from Hilton. What if at the conclusion of the training layoff, there has been no economic upturn and you cannot absorb the employees?
Then you have no other option than to retrench.
Okay, and then where will the training take place given the COVID-19 restrictions on public movement?
CTU provides their training online, so I'm sure there would be some arrangement made regarding that.
Okay, that concludes the questions that we have from the session. If there's anybody else that has questions, please do post them into our chat box. The link is also there for the review of the session. So we will just give another couple of seconds to see if we have any more questions coming through. The recording will most definitely be made available and also distributed. Right, there are no other questions at this stage. Thank you so much for your time and your insight, Runal. As Runal mentioned, training is available through CTU Training Solutions on online platforms. The link has been shared also for an email address to which more information can be sent and requested, as well as we will reach out to all of those who requested more information and assistance with regards to the TERS fund and scheme. So we thank you so much for everyone who has joined us today. Once again, we would like to apologize for the technical difficulties experienced from Microsoft Teams side. We do hope that you enjoyed the session. Please remember that CTU is we might be closed for contact, but we are open for business online. So we look forward to assisting you. And everybody, please have a pleasant evening and stay safe.